Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the OK Grognard Show. It is Monday, October 26, 2020, 10 a.m. Central. Or thereabouts. Beautiful Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. Well, it's Monday, and that means it's Weekly News and Announcements Day. Who won the Artanis? Artanis 8242 won. Artanis already had a badge, but Artanis has a cousin who regularly games with her and would like to share the wealth, share the good fortune, share the luck, and we encourage that. If you get a second badge, no reason you can't pass it along to a family member or a friend. Although, I think we're getting rather close now. I talked about this week being the last one, maybe. Yeah, we'll offer one more. So, this week, which is week 30 of the show, by the way, from the 25th through the 31st, we'll be collecting names from people that are followers of the channel that stop by during a live show, 10 a.m. every day, Monday through Friday, through Saturday through Sunday, every day. We don't take the weekends off. And when you stop by during the show, chime in on the stream chat and be a follower, and we'll add you to that list. And then after the week's over, we'll pull a name from that list, and that person will get a virtual GameholeCon badge, which they will enjoy thoroughly because it looks like it's shaping up to be a really good virtual convention. Bob dropped some hype for us on the Traveler podcast. Did you put us in an airlock? Did you space us? Space us without a helmet? Thank you. I appreciate that. That's the best thing to do when you get an OK Grognard and you're infesting your ship. Trick him into an airlock. And be sure to, make sure that you give him a chance to say a few words. And then, say something clever yourself. I never get calls. What do they want? Yeah? They don't want nothing. Robocalls. On the old phone. I gotta get rid of that. I've had enough of that phone. I mentioned that it's a great show and is really of universal appeal. Well, thanks. Yeah, mainly it's first edition AD&D stuff we talk about over here, but I think general RPG game masters will find a lot of usefulness in what we discuss here. So it's pretty wide-ranging. And if you'd want to get a picture of first edition AD&D, at least one picture of it, one snapshot of it, then the OK Grognard Show is definitely that. I dare say that many first edition AD&D game masters, dungeon masters, run their games somewhat differently from the guidelines, the rules. There are different ways in which you can diverge from them. There are ways in which it is suggested that you diverge. There's certainly some optional things you can bring in. And there are things you can just expunge, things you can ignore, things you can set aside. I know very few people that use weapon speed, which is not to say that the majority of people don't use it, and I just don't know them. But, you know, various different things can be dropped, and the rules are hardy enough to be resilient to adjustment and change. And, you know, in some ways it's about style of play, I guess, and style of the game you want to present, and the style in which the players wish to play. And Bob says, I've never met anyone who used weapon speed. So, okay. Maybe it's a little far-ranging, a little more far-ranging than I'm giving it credit for. But you never know. And you know what? I will go to different tables, and they will do initiative in very different ways. So there's another thing that I think is definitely happening at every table, people rolling for initiative, but it gets changed a whole lot. And consider how abstract combat is in 1E, says Bob. It seems weird to then add in weapon speed. Yeah, you know what? Maybe that's part of why it gets dropped a lot of times, besides being fairly cumbersome. It, I mean, you can bake it into your tables on the character sheet to some degree, right? But you also need to be aware of it when running a game, because you need to figure it into initiative as well. And yeah, it can be awkward. It can definitely be awkward. And trying to create that sort of verisimilitude in a game is difficult to do when so much is abstract, as you say. It's very true. The I thought I'd talk a little bit today, since it's coming up on Saturday, about Halloween and integrating it into your gaming this weekend. There are, you know, if you just search by D&D and Halloween, you will find a ton of homebrewed monsters and adventures written to celebrate Halloween. Certainly there are, takes on the bugbear that utilize that pumpkin-headed version that came out early in the game. There'll be adventures written with skeletons and black cats and witches and all of those sorts of things. You can do a classic movie monster thing. That's something I've done before, where they get locked in a mansion and the various patrons turn out to be, one guy can turn into a werewolf. Up in the attic, there's a laboratory with a mad scientist and a golem on a slab, and you've got another room in the mansion where there's a coffin, and of course there's a vampire, and you've got to have another room with some travelers who have a sarcophagus and a mummy and that they've brought with them. They're transporting across the area, and it just happens everything converges on this one mansion, which in itself is to be haunted as well, right? You can't leave off any of the tropes. Of course, there are cobwebs all over the place and maybe some spiders. You've got to have, maybe one of those crawling disembodied hands get a little homage to the Addams family in one way or another. There's all sorts of things that you can do, and this is true for Halloween and for Christmas. There's so much lore built up about. You've got Santa and his sleigh, and you've got come to life snowmen that throw ice balls at you and do damage, and you've got the heat miser and the freeze meister or snow miser or whatever his counterpart is. And people have written up in Krampus, that old traditional Christmas. And I'm getting further afield from Halloween here. Hey, I should say in the show notes you'll find a link for Fat Dragon Games. They're a patron of mine and support the show. Tom Tullis is a wonderful person and has been a friend for longer than he's been a Patreon supporter. But he is both. And I spread the word about his stuff regularly because I just love his stuff. Going back to his early papercraft buildings and that sort of thing. They're just so cool. His papercraft DM screen. That's really neat. The ultimate DM screen. You should check that out. Of course, he's got all these 3D dungeon STL files that he now creates. Miniatures, there's caverns, there's regular dungeon tiles, dungeon pieces, the three-dimensional ones that, speaking of Artanis, who got the giveaway this week, she passed along some cavern pieces from a 3D printing project that a friend of hers had attempted, and then I forget what the deal was, if they lost their 3D printer and couldn't afford to replace it right away, but they wanted to pass them along so they get used. And hey, Lexfire, how you doing, George? Good to see you. So I've got those in a box, figuring out how to paint them and get those set up. Of course, it's hard to rush to do that sort of thing when that's a face-to-face table thing. But man, what a perfect time to start building up a collection and painting stuff to get ready for when we get back to the face-to-face gaming. Imagine the thrill and delight from your players when you greet them back to gaming at your table and you've got a full array of Fat Dragon Games Dragon Lock pieces printed out so that you can play the game in style. Yeah, it's definitely the time for painting minis and painting terrain and building terrain and getting stuff ready to go, because it's going to seem like leaps and bounds when we get back to it and people have been isolated and working on stuff. But yeah, definitely check that out. It's like Fat Dragon Games Halloween sells a lot of their stuff. Not the newest of new stuff, but all sorts of stuff dating back for 15 years or so, something like that. He's been around since he started doing his papercraft buildings. He's always done 3D terrain. He started off doing the buildings and then moved into 3D printed stuff, and now he includes miniatures and all sorts of cool stuff. So check it out. 25 to 75% off. And I'm sure you'll find something. I pick stuff up every time he runs a sale. There's always something on there that I missed an earlier time, or that I didn't grab one time when I grabbed something else and I meant to and then I forgot, or there's always tons of stuff. So go have a look. Bob says, I need to set up a workspace specifically for mini painting. When I have to clear off my desk, there's just too much to stop me. Right? Yeah. Those little obstacles that get in the way of productivity when it comes to miniatures painting and terrain building and all of the other things. It does help to have a table set up where you can do it. It helps to have a clear space. It helps to have an empty cardboard box that you can just throw out there to protect the table, the space, whatever it is that you're, that you're working on, because it's good to make sure, especially if you're sharing a space, that you're not destroying something in the process of trying to be productive. Wow. You need a place you can work, says George, and then be able to walk away, and you can keep things in progress and come back. It does help. If you're already set up, it's a lot easier to jump in and start painting on a whim when the spirit takes you, so to speak. Hey, you know what? Somebody else wrote up something. I gotta check a link here because in the OK Grognard Show Facebook group, who was it? Somebody dropped a link. Oh, it's Joshua Burnett. Bernie the Flump .blogspot.com. Hey, you know what? I'm going to put that in the show notes. So, Joshua Burnett was nice enough to do a write-up for David S. Pumpkins. So he made David S. Pumpkins stats. If you're not familiar, then definitely do a YouTube search for David S. Pumpkins. It was an SNL sketch from 6 or 7 years ago, I think. And Tom Hanks was in it. Kenan Thompson is an elevator operator in a building billed as a skyscraper of terror. So you ride up in the elevator, and every floor there's a different Halloween scare, some little vignette ready to scare you when the doors open and you're sitting there in a couple of chairs in the elevator. I don't know how viable this is to basically co-opt an elevator for 100 floors and just ride 2 people up in it. How much would they have had to have paid? Not to mention the building is paying for the electricity. I don't know. It's an interesting thought. I know Halloween's going to be kind of weird this year for the kids. That's a shame. Find ways to make it interesting. If it can't be what it's always been, maybe shaking it up a bit is the way to take the edge off everything that's happening. a different Halloween doesn't mean it has to be the worst Halloween or a bad Halloween. You find ways to social distance. I know there was a meme that I shared of somebody else shared, and I shared their post on Facebook with the famous demon head from Tomb of Horrors set up like a small billboard down by the street outside of somebody's home with a tube running up from the back of it. It exits at the mouth all the way up to the porch of the person whose home it was. And they would use that, and the intention is to use that as a way of delivering candy from the house to the street should they get some trick-or-treaters. So it's a win-win for D&D to have a delivery system. It's a pretty cool little thing for sure. I wonder if we can bring this over into there we go. Yeah, let's try this. So here was the shared. You notice the mouth is open. And you see that they have a tube going up to the porch. They've covered it in cottony cobwebs and put some spiders on it to keep people from touching it. Of course, they're kind of isolated up here, the way their driveway is down lower than the front house. I'm sure they have a walkway up to the front door that goes off the other way. This may be a staircase here too. Hard to tell from this. Maybe it's not. It would be pretty tight if it was, but I don't know. There's a railing out there, and I'll bet there's a staircase that goes back down that side toward the driveway. Anyway, it's a neat little way of making sure you can still get the candy to the kids. That's what Halloween's all about, right? Is making sure kids get candy. I know that's how I thought of it when I was a kid. I think it's important to keep that in mind when you're trying to make up some plans for this year, is to think of the kids. Someone think of the children. Always think of the kids on Halloween and holidays like this, because it's where our imaginations are probably most fertile. It's where we are idealistic and creative. Not necessarily at our peak, but it's certainly the place where it all starts. So make sure that kids have the best of everything if you can. I just had a grandnephew on Thursday. My middle nephew, Mike, and Amanda, who've been married a couple years now, just had their first child, a boy, Jackson Russell. Congrats to them. So glad that they have something to mark 2020 other than the usual shenanigans we're all dealing with. So let's call that the biggest announcement on Weekly News and Announcements Day. Well, it's been a good show. we're getting toward the end here. So, who's got any quick Halloweeny questions? Halloweeny, okay. I heard it as soon as I said it. Any quick Halloween questions? We don't have to add an IE. It just makes it awkward. And that's not good. Halloween needs to be an exciting time full of candy and sore stomachs. All right. Well, I'll tell you what. We're going to move it along. Don't forget, if you're a follower and you're here during a live stream, to speak up in the chat stream. Henry, I got you. I got Lexfire, George. Both added into this week's list. So you're good to go. I want to thank everybody who follows the show. I want to thank all the people who get here once a week or once a month or once every now and then. It's still fun. It's still appreciated. Don't forget, 10 a.m. tomorrow, we got our Tuesday cartography and world building. On Wednesday, it's campaign discussion. We've got GMing tips on Thursday. We build adventures on Friday. Saturday is GM reviews. That's a time when we take something, sometimes a gaming book, sometimes something gaming adjacent, sometimes some sort of movie or television show or cartoon, sometimes a book from somewhere else, and we discuss it in terms of what a GM can derive from it for their gaming. So we review it from a GM's perspective, hence GM reviews. Rules retrospectives on Sunday. We do a deep dive into the rules, usually first edition AD&D rules. Sometimes we'll take a chunk of the Dungeon Master's Guide and we'll check it out. I'll tell you where I think I diverge from it, and I'll discuss why. I'll discuss the rules as written, how I feel about them, what I think's particularly good about them, and sometimes what I don't care for. And sometimes we'll do original edition rules too. We've gone back and looked at that, and then looked at, say, a section of the rules from the original edition in comparison to first edition, and look at the changes and why the changes were made. We did a whole series on the main character classes, player character classes, looking at it first from original D&D and then to first edition advanced Dungeons and Dragons. And that was kind of enlightening, especially in comparison to one another as well. So check those out. You know, I should probably take some time and make a few playlists based on some of the things that were series or part 1 and part 2 or whatnot. We'll get around to that at some point. I want to also say, if you're catching up with this on YouTube, thank you very much. Subscribe to the channel. Give us a thumbs up on the various videos you might watch, and feel free to leave a comment, some constructive criticism that helps us make the show better, because there ain't nothing wrong with that. Well, this has been the OK Grognard Show from beautiful Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. Thank you all very, very much, and bye-bye.